Nurse said it was my own fault that he hurt me. This happened to me when I was 21 after an OD suicide attempt. I woke up in the hospital in the middle of the night to a nurse saying he needed to replace my 4. He jabs me 2 or 3 times but doesn't hit a vein, so I ask if he could get someone else to try. He says no and keeps going. As he is doing this, he is pushing and wiggling the needles around under my skin saying he is trying to get the vein. By the 7th or 8th needle, it registers that he is intentionally trying to hurt me. I ask him, "Why are you doing this?" He just says, "It's your own fault you're here." I was too weak to fight back and it was the middle of the night, there was no one else around I could call out to. I have no idea how many times he ended up puncturing me in the end. The next day a different nurse was taking out my 4. She was horrified because she said it was the biggest needle she'd ever seen used on a living patient. Not sure why you would use needles on a dead patient, but that's what she said. A lot of people shrug this off when I tell them about it, but it was so terrifying being alone, helpless, and knowing that the person who was supposed to care for you hated you and wanted to cause you pain. So yeah, night nurse who loves huge needles and hates mentally ill girls, let's not meet again. Edit. Thanks everyone for your kind words and support, you don't know what it means to me. For those wondering, I am doing much better now. This happened 7 years ago. I didn't report it. Very small town, I was scared that people I worked with would find out about my suicide attempt if I pursued it, plus I was just focused on survival. You all have encouraged me, though, and I'm going to do my best to track this guy down and report it to someone. Sending my love to all those who shared their own stories of medical abuse and trauma in the comments. Not a nurse, but a doctor. At 13 my period stopped for a full year. Grandmother repeatedly took me into doctors to get pregnancy tested. I was a virgin. When a doctor roughly examined me and I cried out, he said it was my own fault for whoring around so young. Never did find out what was wrong. While being treated for mental illness, I've encountered some pretty cruel people. It's easy to get away with abusing mentally ill people. Very few people will believe the patient over the nurse orderly doctor. It makes seeking help terrifying, even when you know you desperately need help. And I am very sorry that happened to you. Sounds like you lived a scene right out of a horror movie, and for someone who is already struggling, that must have just been. I don't have the words. There are patient advocates and I would strongly recommend filing a complaint for abuse, at a minimum. If you can get the name of the nurse, consider a police report. That nurse should lose their license and should not be seeing patients. I'm so lucky, I've never met a nasty nurse. I did meet a sadistic orderly. He was cleaning the floor next to my husband's bed and on purpose banged the bed frame with his mop several times. Each time, my poor unconscious husband groaned loudly. The guy kept on doing this. When I asked him not to, of course he acted as if I'd done something wrong. What a turd of a human. My husband doesn't remember this guy, fortunately. We do remember with gratitude and affection the other staff members who worked with him during a 2-week stay. Bless the good nurses. I love them. Here there was a Twitter scandal a couple months ago where a bunch of nurses' doctors were making fun of suicidal or drunk patients and saying they would use the bigger needles and bigger tubes for these patients because they deserved it, asked for it, and were a pain in the ass to take care of. So yeah, these people can be evil. Report the nurse. The nurse is intentionally trying to hurt you. If he did it to you, he will probably do it to someone else. WHO are the monsters who shrug this story off when you tell it. This is absolutely horrifying. That nurse is a serial killer waiting to pounce. It's just a matter of time. You are not wrong. Sending you warm thoughts and all comfy things. I hope you are better. Nurses aren't trained in phlebotomy. It's horrible. I stick people day in and day out, but if I miss twice, I get someone else and I'd never dig around. What happened to you is terrible. People call us vampires, but we have a code of ethics and don't want to hurt you. I really hope you're doing better now. I don't know whether they wanted to cause me pain, but when I got staples in my thigh, the nurse doing it refuses me pain meds. Or a local anesthetic recently been informed that it is standard procedure to give patients local anesthetic for staples. When I asked her for pain meds, she told me I shouldn't need them because I was okay with pain because you self-harmed. She also have to redo them because she kept positioning them so the end of the staple ended up in the cut. I'd like to think that she didn't know what she was doing rather than was doing this intentionally like ARP's nurse. That's just disgusting that someone in a position of power could do that. Here's hoping that he is rotting in a jail cell. I mean, there have been cases where nurses have even murdered their patients. In Finland there was this nurse who murdered her elderly patient by intentionally giving too much insulin, and she also tried to murder an 8-month-old baby the same way. And there was also another nurse here who murdered 5 patients by giving them lethal doses of medications blended in with food. If it happens to you, please for the love of God report those sadists. They have no place in a caretaking facility. They belong in prison. Not as bad as some of the other stories here, but as an 8-year-old my appendix had to be removed on an emergency basis. I spent a few days in hospital. Never having been left alone before, I was frightened and in a lot of pain. The day after the operation, nurse comes in with ice cream which I'm supposed to eat. Worst pain in my life trying to do so. I remember crying as I tried to eat it. When my parents came to see later that day she told them I was being rude and uncooperative. Something similar just happened to me. Went to the doctor and the nurse practitioner thought I was faking my symptoms, and blamed it on my depression. Yeah, I don't think having your lungs feeling like they're on fire has anything to do with that. Turns out I have a bad case of pneumonia. This is like the 3rd time this has occurred because my doctors chalked it up to my depression anxiety. Almost got hospitalized a few times due to my attempts, and this scares the fuck out of me. Glad I never did. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Some abusers place them in a position to do harm to others in vulnerable circumstances. There are many good nurses, but some are sadistic and have a know-it-all God complex, it seems. People who have attempted suicide get punished and hurt in all kinds of ways. That sick fuck nurse needed to be fired. That is horrific. I hope you're doing okay now. I OD'd many years ago when I was 13, I still have the puncture wounds from the drip. I remember coming round and a nurse telling me I should be so ashamed of myself and that she would pray for me. At the tender age of 13 and doing such a thing, I was devastated. Now that I'm 25 years older. These people weren't supposed to judge anyone, just take care of them. I hope the system has changed. This is absolutely terrible and an abuse of power. Fuck this. Some people should not work in the medical field. Psychopaths, sociopaths hides behind every profession. Healthcare is one of the major ones. They hide in plain sight in the guise of serving humanity. Pfots. I once had a nurse draw my blood for a gestational diabetes check, and when he put the needle in, he smiled and said, "Oh, I bet that one hurt." It did hurt and left a massive bruise. Oh no, I had a similar experience. She kept sticking the needle in and my veins were actually on fire. And when I told her it hurt, she said it can't be LOL. She also took like 8 tries on both my wrists and the inside of my arm. I'm quite shy and I rarely have the courage to complain, so I didn't, but God, I wish I could go back and give her a talking to. This is horror movie material, being unable to escape while you're tortured by a nurse. I hate needles. After a midwife stuck one straight through my vein in an attempt to draw blood, my entire arm went purple from my wrist to halfway up my upper arm, and it was heavy and sore for a couple of weeks, so this actually made me feel physically sick. Spald complain to the medical board and get him fired. Also charge him through cops. FK that shit. Holy fuck, that is awful. What happened when the doctors saw you full of needle marks that shouldn't be there? This is appalling. What a POS of a nurse. I'm so sorry this happened to you at a time you were at your MSD vulnerable. Patient abuse is a real thing and is horrible. The way I was treated during labor will forever make me sick to my stomach.